conflict and development. And then the panelists, Dr. Ahmad, the secretary of the panel, and commentator, Dr. Pablo Lopez Ravadan. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The title of my thesis is Nonviolent Resistance Movement in Pakistan, the Black Revolution, 2007 and 9. To describe the Black Revolution, I just want to say that because it is the movement which is led by lawyers and the uniform of the lawyers is black, which I am wearing now. So this is also their presentation. The rhythm of the presentation, I would go motivation and relevance of the study, hypothesis, structure of the investigation, supporting evidences, methodology, lessons derived, expected outcomes and outcomes, limitations of the study, and future research areas. First of all, motivation and relevance to the study. During the 2 years program, we learn about peace, that is the absence of war, not only the absence of war, but absence of structural and cultural violence. So how we can achieve that? The first question was to pursue of positive peace, but how? The second, terrorism and counterterrorism strategy, particularly in the age of present age, in 21st century. The third, non-violence, is another question, whether it is an ineffective and lethargic method to address any conflict in the world. The fourth, Pakistan, from where I belong to, a production factory of terrorism and terrorists. Third, my personal participation in that movement, which I am going to define here. The hypothesis. On those reasons and the relevance to my field studies, this hypothesis I came up. Non-violence is an only method to achieve positive peace as well as to transform the conflict. Second, non-violence is an effective and peaceful method. Third one, terrorism and Pakistan are not synonym. Last one, lawyers' movement, the Black Revolution, which gives me the case study to support my these hypotheses. Pakistan. Before going, I would like to give a background what that movement was, how it was started. Basically, 7th March, 9th March 2007, the then President and Chief of Army Staff, General Pervez Musharraf, he removed the then Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Intl.Bar from his post and made him dysfunctional. He came into the power through coup in 1999, and he became the president in 2002, and then he held the election, general election, which brought controlled legislature in the country. The Chief Justice of Pakistan, before 2005, June 2005, before becoming the Chief Justice of Pakistan, he was sitting in all those benches which were validating all those illegal actions of the Chief of Army Staff and President Pervez Musharraf. But as sooner he took the power, he became the Chief Justice, sooner he left the court-tired benches and provided the justice to all. And this is the background from where then that justice to all, and then the government, the corrupt political system of Pakistan, they feel that it was unfit to our system. So they removed it eventually. This is the rhythm of my thesis. In the beginning, general introduction consists of the guidelines of the study, background, hypothesis, objectives, methodology. The second chapter, which deals with the acquaintance, which went basically to the reader with the non-violence theories and the description of the historical evidences of non-violence in Pakistan. The following chapter gives the background of the revolutionaries and the revolution itself. The following chapter, shining of the sun behind the clouds. The sun is basically the Chief Justice, which started to give justice to all, and the clouds is basically black, which were the uniform of the lawyers, and he came up from behind them. So in that chapter, I described an individual discourse. It was the just, no of the Chief Justice to the Chief of Army Staff, and then it turns into a social and political discourse. The next chapter basically describes the different phases, important phases of that movement, favorable and unfavorable. My following chapter, which is basically, I think, it is because I have the background of professionalism in gender, so that is why I have that knowledge which I could utilize here And I want to highlight, as Bowling says, that we should highlight the roles of the movement where in the for which played a constructive role in the history of the world. So here I want to distinguish and highlight the impact and the role of women during that movement and later their status in the country. My last chapter is basically the comparison between the violent movement in the form of war on terror and non-violent movement in the form of lawyers' movement, to show the advantages and disadvantages of these two movements. What is better, what is bad. And then the revolution, which is not the conclusion basically, but I came up with different lessons which I derived from these studies. First of all, I describe here Montesquieu's power sharing, the separation of power theory, which basically talks about the legislative, judiciary, executive, and their relationship, three important organs of the state. Another theory which says that the legislative describes the law, judiciary defines the law, and executive implements the law. And the problem begins in Pakistan when that rule, after making the law, the legislative has to come down under the judiciary to see how judiciary works and define the law. So there is the problem of the transformation, and it starts like this. The second important lesson which I derive, the secular movement. Pakistan, Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and many people, they perceive that it is it produces extremism, extreme Islamic form. So that is why in that movement I want to describe that that movement is purely based secular. There was not any objective that we are, if we achieve that objective, our God will be happy and we would be placed in heaven. That movement is for justice and for the justice. The last lesson which I derive is basically I do comparison with the Russian revolutions, 1905 and 1917. It is the same as the Russian Revolution was the first in 20th century, and the lawyers' movement, the Black Revolution, is the first in 21st century. So that is why I try to compare that the Russian Revolution of 1905, for those faults and for those mistakes which the people of Russia they did in 1905, that is why, as scholars, political scholars, they say that those faults, because of that, 1917 revolution came up. So in that, after reviewing the lawyers' movement, I also derive a lesson. If our political system, if our politicians, if our citizens, they would not be aware very well about their equality, about their justice, it might be possibility then we have to see another revolution like Russian Revolution in 1917. For that, to do that research, definitely I need sources, and to support my hypothesis, I go primary sources, which was first of all my personal reflection. In the thesis, you have already seen that personally I mentioned many examples to be there and to part of that movement. And then the conducting of interviews of the important figures of the movement, which was also very important to know what their views are. And then the secondary sources which I use, the media coverage, print, electronic, journals, organizations report. As you can see that it is a very recent activity, 2007 and 2009. And there is only one book which was published in 2008, even before the ending of that revolution. So I have to go through with all articles during these 2 years. And articles, journal article, newspaper article, which I would say that it increased my number of glasses, but it was quite fit that I came up with that result. And then literature review to equip myself the theories of nonviolence, what is nonviolence and how we can see it. So in that, I would indicate Galton, Jean Shaw, Peter Ackerman, Christopher Kruegel, Marshall V. Rosenberg, Gandhi, Ellis Boulding. It also defines that different chapters have their own sources, but overall, I consult these literature. Methodology. I adopted qualitative method, the following 2 techniques: questionnaire, interviews via telephone, Skype, and comparative method to compare the lawyers' movement with the war on terror. I use that method. and then descriptive method to analyze the sources which I have to define this movement. And then expected outcomes, which would be in future, and some outcomes which I had already. First of all, a documented record of the movement for future researchers. As I already mentioned, it is a very recent activity, and many organizations, they have already asked me to show my final product for the publication. And then a platform to highlight the role of Pakistanis for the world, how they are, and they are not violent but non-violent. The only thing is how to lead them. The 10 strong non-violent case study of 21st century, which would continue to support non-violent method for sustainable and positive peace to address any issue in the world. And at personal level, I would also, I'm very happy to share that I have already received Liverpool Research Grant for 3 years to research on non-violent history in Pakistan, including the lawyers' movement, and International Bar Association Human Rights Institute, which has headquarters in Geneva. They have already asked me to send my copy for publication. And for all these pieces, definitely there were some limitations, and I want to share here that to search geos of resources in the deep water of Internet Ocean is quite difficult. If you search and then you came up with many results, and then you have to see. And I think I have gone through uncountable articles which were in some cases useless to read. I could save my time if I had the resources in hard copies. Financial constraints, definitely, because I couldn't go to Pakistan to visit for field study for this particular thesis, though I had already been the part of that movement. But for this particular thesis, if personally I would have been there, definitely the interviews, the quality, and to meet my personal deadlines, it would have been better for me. Distance from Spain, from Pakistan to Spain is another to use communication, sometimes good, sometimes bad, so that is another limitation. And then another to be here, it is Castellano and Valencia being the lingua franca of the region of this university. It also hampered me to find good second resources in English related to my topic. It's about Pakistan and about the history of Pakistan. So I also find difficulty to do that. Future research area. As I have already told that I have received one scholarship, but it was also related to my interest. But we also share one in Pakistan. We have a saying that marriage is kind of a laddu, sweet bakery thing. If people, they eat, they regret, and if they don't eat, they also regret. So that is why when I was doing this research, so I also regret, what a tough time, I'm getting. It has been better if I would have chosen field research, internship. But at the end, when I came up with this result, so I'm quite happy and want to move on to do my further research. Apart from that, each chapter has flexibility and potential to do further research. But my interest is non-violence history of Pakistan with focus to non-violent struggles of women in Pakistan. That would be my future research area. And Shukriya, thanks for your attention. Now open for the comments and questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.